Hi, and welcome to TECM 5195. Today we're going to be talking about editing for cohesion, sort of in the larger context of editing for organization and organizing documents. And a lot of this content will come from Revising Professional Writing, Chapter 8. So what is cohesion? Cohesion occurs in a text if the movement from part to part is easy to follow. So that's sort of the formal definition. I really like to think about it in two distinct ways. First, we've got sort of the macro level cohesion, right? Do paragraphs of text connect with one another? And do sections that include multiple paragraphs, do those connect with one another? Is there a flow from the beginning to the end of the document? And we'll talk about that a little bit in some of the other videos. Today we're going to focus on micro level cohesion, really looking at cohesion within a paragraph. So connecting one sentence to the next sentence and making sure that because the sentences connect, we'll have a cohesive paragraph. Okay, so one of the strategies for really identifying and revising and editing content for cohesion is what's called the given new principle. And the given new principle really is pretty easy to follow, and it's really got two main ideas. And the first is we've got some given information that we're giving the audience, and that appears in the subject slot. And as we discussed in previous videos and in previous content in this course, the subject slot is typically the first noun phrase in a sentence. New information, on the other hand, appears in the predicate slot. And as we discussed in previous videos and content in the class, the predicate spot is typically started with the verb phrase and all of the content after the verb phrase. Okay, so that's important to know. Here's an example of a question or of the sentence. The semester began in August. Our given information is our subject, the semester. And our new information is that it began in August, right? So there's really two bits or ideas in this sentence. One is that there's a semester, and two is that it began in August. Okay, so how do we implement this given new principle to help us revise or edit for cohesion? Well, there's really two ways or two main patterns that we can use to do this. There's the ABBC pattern and the ABAC pattern. And these letters are maybe a little confusing to you at first, but these are just ways to label sentences. So let's take a look at a couple examples, and I think that will help clarify things. So here's an example of the ABBC pattern, and really what we're saying is each sentence has two ideas, one in the subject and one in the predicate, and we're going to label them as such. So the first sentence here is, the semester began at the end of August. The semester is labeled A, that's our first idea. Began at the end of August is labeled B, that's our second idea. In our second sentence, we need to connect. So for us to have cohesion, there needs to be some connection between the first sentence and the second sentence. And in this case, we're connecting with the predicate. So we're saying we're restating August, and that's labeled B as well, is usually the busiest time of the school year. That's labeled C. Right, so the cohesion occurs because there's some connection between the first and second sentence. We can look at an example of ABAC, and that's in the first two sentences. And I also just added an ACCD to look at the second how the second sentence connects to the third sentence. Just to show you that this doesn't just occur between two sentences in isolation, but it actually occurs, it can occur throughout an entire paragraph. So sentence one is the same exact sentence as the previous example. The semester began at the end of August. But instead of referring to the predicate or the thing that's labeled B, we refer back to the thing that's labeled A, the idea that's labeled A. So we say the start of the semester, so that's labeled A again, is usually the busiest time of the school year. That's our new piece of information in this sentence, and that's labeled C. So to connect the second and third sentence, we've got this idea of busyness or busiest time of the school year, and we repeat that idea in the third sentence. So that's labeled C. The busyness can often be overwhelming to students, and that's labeled D. Okay, so these are just some examples. You can kind of pause the slide if you need to see how we can use these patterns and this given new principle to create cohesion from sentence to sentence in a paragraph. So violating the given new principle, here's an example. The letters don't really matter all that much, but I labeled them for you, A, B, C, A, and C, A, D, E. So these are examples of sentences that are not adhering to the given new principle. And I'll just read this to you, or you can read this on your own in your head, but you can see how it's difficult to understand when there's no cohesion in a paragraph. So it reads, the semester began at the end of August. The busiest time of the year is the beginning of the semester. Overwhelmed is what students feel during this time. Right? So all three sentences are related, but they don't necessarily connect with one another. And so this is an example of introducing new information and not connecting it back to old information or information that's presented in the previous sentence. So real quickly, 3 strategies for cohesion. How can we achieve this? The first is repeating the noun phrase. So in this example, we've got a sentence. The first sentence reads, the hard drive was built using new technology. We just repeat that word technology. This technology was developed in the last year. And that's an A, B, B, C pattern. I want to present to you all 3 of these strategies, though, because if we just repeated the noun phrase over and over and over again, the sentence would actually be quite repetitive and boring to the reader. And so we want to sort of vary the use of these strategies as we're creating and editing for cohesion in our documents. Our second strategy is to use a synonym. So this hard drive was built using new technology. That's our AB. We're going to go back to A and say this hardware instead of hard drive. Similar sounding word, but it's a synonym for hard drive. Was included in the new computer. So we can use a synonym. Or thirdly, we can use a pronoun. The hard drive was built using new technology, and then it was developed by engineers at Apple, connecting it with new technology, or replacing new technology with the pronoun it. Okay, so those are 3 strategies for cohesion. Before we close up this video, I want to quickly talk about strategies for editing and teaching cohesion. So if you find yourself teaching students or giving feedback to students about their writing and how to create cohesion in their writing, really the thing that I want to hammer home is this idea of big picture first, right? So it doesn't make sense to take a 5-page document and just start labeling things A, B, B, C, B, C, C, D, right? That would be crazy for you to do as an editor, and that would be crazy for you to teach your students to do as writers. And so starting at the high level of when you're editing for organization, it's really important that you just read the document as a whole. And then ask yourself a couple questions. One, does this paragraph make sense? Right? If it makes sense, you may want to look at sentences and how they connect with one another, but it may not make sense to start to label things and use this given new principle yet. Another question you can ask yourself, does it have one controlling idea? Is there one main idea in this paragraph, and what is that main idea? And then thirdly, does it connect to the document as a whole? Does this paragraph connect to the paragraph before it and the paragraph after it? And if the answer to any of those 3 questions are no, then you may have an issue with cohesion, right? And so that's when so it's really starting at the big picture and then coming into the more specific strategies. And so as you're editing longer documents and as you're teaching students to write longer documents, it's important to teach them to connect sentences to one another, but it's also important to teach them to start with the big picture and then kind of zero in on the given new principle as a strategy for creating cohesion. Okay, so there's some practice exercises that I'd like you to complete. Once you complete those, we'll be done with this video.